The smell of freshly ground coffee always takes me back to Virginia. She brewed it every morning, filling our little house with that rich, welcoming aroma that marked the start of a new day. 10 years have passed, and I still brew it the way. She taught me letting the water slowly run through each grain. My hands aren't what they used to be. 71 years have taken their toll. My joints ache, especially on mornings like this when the humidity settles in. Today, in North Little Rock, the fog is rolling in over the Arkansas River, and my old back feels every inch of it. I glance at my watch. 5:30 a.m. The old habit of getting up before dawn sticks with me, even though I haven't worked in the restaurant. Every day for a long time, that rhythm hasn't changed. I opened Old Wharf 26 years ago when the neighborhood was still a rundown industrial area. No one thought a decent restaurant could survive here. Except for Virginia and me. I pour coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the cracked glaze. Virginia. Wanted to throw it away about 15 years ago, but I wouldn't let her. This mug is like me, honey. Shabby, but still holding its shape, I used to joke. She'd laugh and kiss my forehead, her hands smelling of lavender soap. The kitchen window overlooks the river. I used to live on the other side of town, but after Virginia died, I moved above the restaurant. Merritt, my daughter, called it pathetic. An old man living above his diner. If she only knew how much the apartment and restaurant were worth, but I never told her. Why? To see if her attitude toward me would change. But I'm too old for that kind of game. I finish my coffee and start packing. Even though the restaurant doesn't open until 11 o'clock, I'm always there by 7 to check supplies and talk to the staff. My closet is simple dark pants, a light-colored shirt, comfortable shoes, and an old tweed jacket with elbow patches. Merritt calls me an old-fashioned poor man. But appearances can be deceiving. I go downstairs and open the service entrance. The morning air smells like the river and wet asphalt. I love that smell. It reminds me of when I first opened Old Wharf, meeting deliveries right here. Good morning, Mr. A. Rowan Page, my chef and deputy, greets me. It's only 6:45, and he's already here. Rowan, you're too early, I tease, shaking my head but smiling. He's a lot like I was when I was younger, obsessed with the kitchen, in love with the craft. We have a big group for dinner tonight. Wanted to check the supplies, he says, as he helps me to the door. I'm not an invalid, kid, I grumble, though I don't mean it. I know, sir. But my mom raised me to respect my elders, he replies with a smile. I see him as the son Virginia, and I never had. Rowan's been with me for 9 years. He came here as an inexperienced cook, and now he runs the kitchen better than I did at his age. Merritt doesn't care about my life, but she'd know about Rowan if she did. She's only been here twice in the last 5 years, both times when she needed money. Inside, the restaurant is already buzzing with activity. Jenny, our hostess, arranges fresh flowers on the tables, her hands graceful as a dancer. Mr. Endicott, the vegetable delivery's here, she says, nodding toward the back door. Thanks, sweetheart, I reply, heading for the warehouse. Tommy, our vegetable supplier, is unloading boxes. He's a third-generation farmer, and his produce is the best around. Birch, look at the tomatoes I brought in today, Tommy says, holding out a ripe one. Take a bite. I bite into the tomato, and the juice runs down my chin. Sweet with a bit of sour. Perfect. I'll take it all, I say, and Tommy beams. Moments like this are what true wealth is, not the money in the bank, but the perfect taste of a tomato. And the smile of the man who grew it. By 8 o'clock, the rest of the staff arrives, our cooks, waiters, and bartenders. Many have been with me for years. Some call me sentimental, but I think of us as family, the kind of family I've chosen. Mr. A, we have an issue with a reservation, Lori, our receptionist, says. The Hayes group wants a table for 6, but we're booked up, she adds, and my stomach tightens. Fletcher Hayes, my brother-in-law, a narcissistic turkey who treats me like a poor relative despite being deep in debt. Are they celebrating here? I ask, hiding my surprise. Yeah, they're celebrating Mr. Hayes' promotion. I almost laugh. Merritt's going to celebrate at my restaurant without even realizing it's mine. Find a place for them, Lori, and don't tell them I'll be here. I appreciate my employees. They respect my privacy. By 10:30, the restaurant is ready to open. I check every detail, from table arrangements to lighting. Many restaurant owners have stopped caring about these things, but not me. Old Wharf is an extension of myself, my legacy. Rowan briefs the staff, speaking confidently but without arrogance. He's a good guy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Merritt had chosen someone like him over Fletcher. Merritt, my only daughter, 46 years old and still trying to prove something to the world, like a little girl who couldn't get the expensive toys she wanted. I remember when she was 12, crying because we couldn't afford the designer jacket she wanted. Virginia tried to explain, but Merritt couldn't understand. Things changed when I won a regional cooking competition and received a grant to open my restaurant. But by then, Merritt had already made up her mind. We were losers in her eyes. She went to college on a scholarship, which I secretly paid for by working 18-hour days. Virginia wanted to tell her, but I insisted Merritt think she achieved everything on her own. Maybe that was a mistake. In college, she met Fletcher, the son of an insurance agent. He introduced himself as a top-tier financial advisor. Merritt was fascinated by his stories of wealth and social circles. When she brought him home, he barely concealed his contempt for our humble life. I own a restaurant, I answered. It's nothing special. After they married, Merritt visited less and less. After Virginia died, she came even less. Too busy, too far away. I didn't blame her. I didn't want to waste energy resenting her when I had so little time left. With Virginia worried about Merritt and Aya until her last breath. Promise me you won't leave them, she whispered to me. There's blood, Birch. That's all we leave behind, I promised. But I knew Merritt didn't need me. She'd structured her life to keep me on the periphery. After the funeral, she helped me sell the house. It's too big for you, Dad, she said, unaware of the apartment above Old Wharf, which was worth 3 times as much as the house. I gave her the money from the sale for Aya's education. Fletcher wasn't happy. He expected more, Mr. Endicott. Laurie's voice breaks my thoughts. The first guests have arrived. It's 11 o'clock. Time to open. I greet the elderly couple, regulars who come every Saturday. Mrs. Caldwell smiles at me. Her husband shakes my hand. Birch, darling, how are you doing? She asks, and in her eyes I see genuine concern. Never better, Eleanor, I reply, and it's true. I've got this restaurant, my people, my guests. I'm not a rich man in a $1,000 suit like Fletcher imagines. I'm just a man who's found his place in life. I escort the couple to their table by the window. The day begins. Merritt and her family will be here tomorrow, and they won't even know they're dining at their poor father and grandfather's restaurant. Ironic. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but that's life. Life I've chosen. Through the glass doors of the restaurant, I can see the city waking up. North Little Rock has never been big or bustling, but in recent years it's been changing, becoming more vibrant, and so have myself. Who would have thought a 70-year-old widower could feel more alive than ever? My gaze stops on a picture of Virginia hanging in an inconspicuous corner of the bar. She's smiling. That special smile that was always just for me. I kept my promise, sweetheart. I think I didn't leave them behind, just doing it my way. The phone call rang in the middle of the afternoon as I was going over the invoices in my office. Merritt's name popped up on the screen. She rarely called, usually when she needed something, so I braced myself for another request for money. "Yes, Merritt," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Dad." Her tone was businesslike, as if she were talking tone unfamiliar customer. "It's Ayla's birthday in 3 days, 23 years old. We're having a little dinner on Thursday, 7 o'clock at night. She's asked that you come too." She asked. Not "we want you to come," not "we'd love to have you." No, my granddaughter asked, and my daughter fulfills it as an unpleasant obligation. "Of course, I'll come," I replied, not showing how I was hurt by her tone. "Thank you for the invitation. Just please don't be late like last time, Shedded." She faltered. "I don't need any extravagant gifts. You know, these are difficult times for everyone." It was her way of reminding me of my modest financial situation, as if I could forget the role I had played all these years. "Don't worry," I said. "Nothing extravagant." Good. She was clearly in a hurry to end the conversation. "I'll see you Thursday then." "Bye, Dad." She hung up before I could say goodbye. Typical of Merritt. Always in a hurry, always feeling like talking to me was a waste of her precious time. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the picture of Aya on my desk. A picture from 5 years ago when she graduated from college. I hadn't been to her graduation. Merritt had told me that seating was limited and they'd called Fletcher's parents because they'd helped with the tuition. In fact, half of the tuition was covered by me through an anonymous trust fund I set up for my granddaughter, but only my attorney and Dee knew about it. Sighing, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was an antique brooch, a silver lily with asmal pearl in the center. It had belonged to my mother and before her to my grandmother. Virginia had kept it for it, but our daughter had never shown any interest in old-fashioned trinkets. Now I've decided to give it to Aya. She probably won't appreciate it either. It's the last family heirloom I have left. I closed the restaurant earlier than usual on Thursday, leaving Rowan to handle the final details. Merritt and Fletcher's house was in an upscale neighborhood, a 3-story brick mansion with columns and a manicured lawn. They'd bought it 3 years ago with a huge mortgage. Fletcher boasted that it was an investment in the future, but I knew from my banker, who was also Fletcher's banker, that they were barely keeping up with the monthly payments. Pulling up to the house, I parked my old Toyota between Fletcher's gleaming Lexus and some sports car, probably belonging to one of their guests. My car looked out of place in that driveway, as did myself at their parties. I put the box with the brooch in the inside pocket of my jacket, next to an envelope that contained a check for a substantial sum of money. My real gift to Aya that no one would ever know about. The money would go to the same trust fund she didn't even know existed. The door was opened by Aya herself. Her blonde hair was gathered into an elegant style and her eyes flashed something like genuine joy when she saw me. "Grandpa." She hugged him lightly and I smelled the scent of expensive perfume. "You've come." Of course I came. I smiled. "Happy birthday." "Sweetheart." I handed her a small bouquet. Nothing fancy. Just the white lies that Virginia had always loved. "Thank you. They're beautiful." Ayla took the flowers and for a moment I saw my late wife in her. The same tilt of her head, the same genuine smile. "Is Daddy here?" Merritt's voice from the back of the house shattered the moment. She appeared in the hallway dressed in an elegant black dress that I was sure cost more than she could afford. "Hello, Merritt." I stepped forward to hug her, but she limited herself to a formal kiss on the cheek. "You're just in time," she said in a tone that was rare. "Come on in." Everyone solidly gathered. I followed her into the spacious living room where a group of well-dressed people stood with glasses in their hands. Fletcher, in a suit that screamed of its expensiveness, was talking to 2 men about his own age. When he saw me, He feigned a smile that did not touch his eyes. "Ah, Birch," he approached, extending his hand. "Glad you were able to get out." Get out. It was like I was living in the middle of nowhere instead of downtown. Thanks for the invitation, Fletcher. I shook his hand, sensing the falseness in his shake. "Let me introduce you to my colleagues," he gestured to the men. "This is Harrison Winslow, our vice president, and Pierce Aldridge, our chief investment strategist. Gentlemen, this is Birch Endicott, Merritt's father." "Nice to meet you," Harrison said with a kind of politeness that borders on disdain. "You work in the catering business, I believe?" Pierce asked, his tone clearly condescending. "Yes, in the catering business," I answered simply, without elaborating. "Birch is a cook," Fletcher interjected with a strained smile. "A little restaurant by the river. What's it called, Birch?" "The Old Wharf. The Old Wharf," I corrected, wondering how he'd managed to forget the name of the place where his wife had grown up. I often took little Merritt into the kitchen with me, teaching her how to bake cookies and make pasta. But I guess those memories weren't worth keeping. Right. Fletcher waved his hand nonchalantly. "Harrison just bought a steak in Blue Harbor. You know that new upscale restaurant on River Drive? Terrific place. You should stop by sometime. Although," he grinned, "it's pretty expensive." Blue Harbor had only been open a month and was a direct competitor to the Old Wharf. Only their chef couldn't match Rowan, and the interior was too pretentious for the local crowd. I knew from my suppliers that they were already struggling financially. "I've heard of it," I said neutrally. "I hope it's a good investment." Harrison smiled smugly. "Oh, it certainly is. We're already getting offers from several restaurant groups looking to buy franchises." I knew that was a lie. No one would buy a franchise of a restaurant that hadn't yet proven to be profitable. But I just nodded, maintaining an expression of polite interest. "Dad." Merritt walked over and took me under her arm. "Let me show you where you're sitting." She took me to the upper end of the long dining table, obviously as far away from the center as possible, where Aya and the importunquists were supposed to sit. "Here?" I asked, pointing to the card with my name in it. "Yes." She adjusted the flower arrangement on the table. "I thought you'd be more comfortable here, not as noisy. In other words, away from everyone so I don't embarrass them with my presence." "Of course," I agreed. "Very thoughtful of you." Merritt looked at me suspiciously, trying to see if I was being sarcastic, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'll be right back," she said, noticing that new guests had entered the room. I was alone watching Merritt and Fletcher greet an older couple. Apparently Fletcher's parents, judging by the resemblance. Mr. Hayes was a tall, statuesque man with silver temples. His wife, a well-groomed woman with a strange smile and perfect posture. They hugged Aya, handing her a large gift box. I hadn't met them since Merritt's wedding 25 years ago. Back then, they hadn't even tried to hide their disappointment at their son's choice. "A teacher and a cook," I heard Mrs. Hayes whisper to one of the guests. "Fletcher was always too generous." "Grandpa," Aya came up to me with a glass in her hand. "Don't you miss me?" "Not now," I smiled. "Happy birthday again. 23 is a wonderful age. Thank you." She sat down next to me. "I'm sorry about, Mom and Dad." "They just don't apologize," I interrupted gently. "It's okay. I'm glad I could make it." Shesmold, and there was something genuine in that smile, not like her parents' polished smiles. "I'm glad you came too. We don't get to see each other that much." "It's my fault," I lied, not wanting to turn her against her parents. "I've been working a lot at that restaurant." Still, she asked with slight surprise, "You're already how old?" 71. "Yes, still fair," I nodded. "And yes, 71. But work keeps me in shape." "I guess." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I've never been to your restaurant. It's weird, isn't it?" A little, I agreed, suppressing the urge to tell her the truth. Maybe you could stop by sometime. Maybe, she shrugged. But I could see it was unlikely. The old wharf was a place her parents didn't talk about in their social circle. I have something for you, I said, pulling out a velvet box. This belonged to your great-grandmother and her mother before her. Ayla openeth the box with interest. The brooch sparkled in the light of the chandelier, the pearl glowing softly. Wow, she exhaled gingerly, touching the silver petals. It's beautiful. Your grandmother, Virginia, wanted the women in your family to have it, I said quietly. Now it's yours. What's going on her? Merritt sprang up beside us, her gaze immediately falling on the brooch. What is it? My grandfather gave me a family jewel. Aya showed her the brooch with admiration. It belonged to her great-grandmother. Merritt took the box from her daughter's hands, examining it critically. It's just an old trinket, she said. And I saw Aya's smile fade. The silver is tarnished, and the pearls are probably fake. They're real pearls, I objected calmly. And silver can be cleaned, Papa. Merritt lowered her voice as if she was afraid someone might hear. I appreciate you wanting to give me a gift, but Ayla is 23. She's amateur girl. She's not going to wear such antique things. Actually, I like it. Ayla intervened, taking the brooch from her mother. It's unique and it has a history. Merritt pressed her lips together, clearly unhappy that her daughter didn't support her. Well, if you like it, but don't expect to wear it to any decent event. It's too old-fashioned. I'll wear it whenever I want, Ayla said firmly. And I saw a glimmer of character in her that her parents couldn't quite suppress. Merritt was about to reply, but she was interrupted by the clinking of glasses as Fletcher called everyone to the table. It's time for dinner, she said with a strange smile. Ayla, dear, your place is in the center. Daddy, you're over there at the end of the table. I nodded and headed to my seat, feeling Aya's gaze on me. I knew Merritt would try to minimize my interaction with her granddaughter during the evening, but I was glad for even this brief conversation. The dinner was exquisite, but bland, like most things in Merritt and Fletcher's home, expensive, but without soul. I ate in silence, watching the other guests socialize, laughing, exchanging stories, from which I was excluded. Fletcher stood up, raising his glass. I'd like to propose a toast to our beautiful daughter, he began. Ayla, you are our pride and joy. Your achievements in marketing are already impressive, and you're just starting out. Everyone clapped, and I thought about the fact that Ayla's accomplishments were mostly about getting jobs through Fletcher's connections. It wasn't that she wasn't capable. It was just that she'd never really had to fight for anything. And he'd like to announce, Fletcher continued, that in honor of Aya's birthday and Myrison promotion, we're taking the whole family out for the weekend to the Blue Harbor, the best restaurant in town. The guests hummed in approval. I suppressed a smile at the thought that they would be disappointed. Blue Harbor was still a raw project with inconsistent quality. And the day after tomorrow, Fletcher added, his voice even more smug, we're going to celebrate my promotion at another great place, the Old Wharf Restaurant. I almost choked on my wine. They were going to celebrate at my restaurant tomorrow. They say the food's pretty good, Fletcher said, giving me a condescending look. It's not as fine as Blue Harbor's, though. I've heard good things about the Old Wharf, said one of the guests. An elegant middle-aged woman. Didn't their chef win some prestigious award last year? Yes, he did, I confirmed, not specifying that Rowan had been named best chef in Arkansas by the most respected culinary magazine. Were you other, Dad? Merritt asked with slight surprise. Sometimes, I answered evasively. Wow. She looked a little puzzled. I didn't know you could afford places like this. Oh, I didn't say I eat there, I smiled. I just go in once in a while. Fletcher laughed, and his slaughter was echoed by the other guests, obviously finding it amusing that someone like me could be a customer at a decent restaurant. Anyway, he raised his glass even higher. Here's to Aya, to her bright future. To Aya, the guests echoed. I raised my glass too, meeting me granddaughter's gaze across the table. She smiled weakly at me, and in her eyes I saw something like an apology. When dessert was eaten and coffee was served, I decided I had done my social duty and could leave. I quietly stood up and walked over to Aya, who was talking to a young man. Judging from their interaction, her boyfriend, Aya, honey, I have to go. I said, I have to get up early tomorrow. Oh, you're leaving already? She looked a little disappointed. Thanks for coming, Grandpa. And for Thebruch, it's really special. She hugged me, and for a moment I felt that there was a real connection between us despite Merritt's best efforts. Is Burr leaving? Fletcher appeared beside us, his face flushed from the wine he drunk. So soon? We haven't even cut the cake yet. I have to work tomorrow, I explained. Thanks for the invitation. Work? He shook his head with exaggerated sympathy. At your age, you still have to work. Merritt and I hope to be retired by the time we're 60. We have a solid pension fund. You? No. I knew that their solidfund barely covered their monthly expenses, but I didn't say anything. Some of us like working, I said simply. Sure. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. Well, I'll see you Somete. Merritt didn't even come out to see me off. Ayla walked me to the door, gave me another hug, and promised to call soon. A promise I knew she was unlikely to keep through no fault of her own. As I got into my car, I looked up at the lighted windows of the house where my family was celebrating without me. Tomorrow they'll come to my restaurant, unaware of whose restaurant it really is. Well, perhaps it was time for a little surprise. It had been a troublesome morning. One of the suppliers had delayed the delivery of fresh fish, and Rowan was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Mr. A, what do we do? The fish was supposed to arrive 3 hours ago, and we have a full booking today. He nervously listened through the reservation list. Take it easy, Rowan. I put my hand on his shoulder. Marco always has fresh catch at the market. Send Jason there right now, and I'll call Marco to put aside the best for us. Rowan looked at him gratefully. What would we do without you, Mr. A? You'd do just fine, he smiled. Speaking of tonight's reservations, is the hay table for 8 o'clock tonight still on? Rowan nodded, looking at the list. Yes, confirmed yesterday. 6 people, table number 9, center of the room, as you requested. I nodded at the best table in the restaurant, overlooking the river and conveniently located so everyone in the room could see the people sitting at it. Perfect for what I had planned. All right, tell Lori to put the best winnie in their table. And alert the staff. I'll be present in the lounge tonight, not just the kitchen. Rowan raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't ask any questions. Over the years of working together, my staff has learned to respect my privacy. Whatever you say, Mr. A, you got it. I spent the day doing the usual things, checking supplies, discussing new menu items with Rowan, dealing with administrative issues, but my thoughts kept returning to the evening ahead. I didn't plan to make a scene or publicly humiliate Merritt and Fletcher. I just wanted them to know the truth on my terms, not theirs. By 7 o'clock, I went up to my apartment, showered, and changed into my only expensive suit, a dark blue tailored suit. Virginia had insisted on it years ago. You're a restaurant owner, Birch, not a dishwasher. Have at least one a decent suit, she'd said. Then, I rarely wore it, only on special occasions. Today was just such an occasion. When I got down to the restaurant, it was starting to fill up. Lori met me at the front of the room, her eyes widening at the sight of my suit. Mr. Endicott, you look amazing. She was clearly surprised. Thank you, Lori. Have the Hayes arrived yet? Not yet. They have an 8 o'clock reservation and it's only 1:15 to 7 o'clock. Good. Show them out when they get here and let me know. I made my way to the kitchen where Rowan and his team were in the midst of preparations. Seeing me, Rowan froze for a moment, then smiled broadly. Well, Mr. A, did you decide to outshine everyone today? Just a special occasion, I replied, feeling a little awkward with all the attention. Must be very special, he said, returning to his work. By 8 o'clock, the restaurant was full. I watched the room from a small gap in the door leading to the kitchen. At precisely 8 o'clock, the door opened and in walked Merritt and Fletcher, followed bitwo other couples about their age. I recognized one of them, the same colleagues of Fletcher's I'd met at Taya's birthday party. Aya wasn't with them, which disappointed me a little. Lori greeted them with a professional smile and escorted them to table 9. Fletcher walked with an air of importance, as if he owned the place, and Merritt looked around with that special mixture of criticism and admiration she always displayed in places she considered status. They sat down, and Brandon, one of our best waiters, immediately came over with a menu and wine list. I saw Fletcher smugly say something, probably bragging about his wine knowledge, and his guests nodded in agreement. I decided to wait until they had ordered and gotten their first courses before showing up. I didn't want to spoil their appetite. Before their time, 45 minutes later, when they were finishing their appetizers and starting the main courses, I adjusted my tie and went out into the hall. My plan was simple. Walk up to their table as if I just noticed them, say hello, and see what the reaction was. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I wanted to see the look on their faces when they realized I was here too. I slowly made my way through the hall, saying hello to some of the regulars who looked surprised at my costume. I usually showed up at the lounge in simpler clothes. When I approached Merritt's table, they were engrossed in conversation and did notice me. Fletcher was telling a story, waving his arms, and the others were laughing. Good evening, I said quietly. Merritt looked up and froze with her fork in her hand. Her face changed as if Somione had turned off the lights from animated amusement to shock and horror in a split second. Daddy. Her voice was almost a whisper. What are you doing here? Fletcher turned around, his smile gone. Birch. He looked just as shocked as Merritt. What a surprise. I noticed you as I walked by and thought I'd say hello, I said, deliberately not answering Merritt's question directly. I see you're celebrating Fletcher's promotion. Merritt recovered quickly, her shock replaced by irritation. Yes, we're having a family celebration. She glanced at her guests who were watching. You asked curiously. I thought so. I nodded. I'll leave you to it. I was about to move away, but Merritt stood up suddenly. Daddy, can I talk to you for a minute? She nodded toward the corridor leading to the restrooms. I followed her, feeling the stares of everyone at the table. As soon as we were out of hearing range, Merritt turned to me abruptly. What are you doing here? Her eyes narrowed. Are you following? U.S.? Of course not, I answered calmly. I'm just having dinner here. Dining? She almost laughed. Dad, this is one of the most expensive restaurants in town. You can't afford to dine here. How do you know what I can afford and what I can't? I asked, feeling the bitterness growing inside. You've never taken an interest in my finances. I know how much a cook makes in a place like this. She lowered her voice as if she was afraid someone would hear. And it's certainly not enough to eat dinner here. Stop it, Dad. You're embarrassing us. I was just saying hello, Merritt. What's awkward about it? Everything. She waved her hand angrily. Your age, your clothes. What's wrong with my clothes? It pointed to my suit. It's Armani, by the way. She looked at me, INCREDULOUSL. Why, where did you get the money for Armani? Maybe I'm not as poor as you think, I replied, feeling my patience wearing thin. Stop it, Dad. She shook her head. I've seen your apartment, your car. You're living on a pension and a cook's salary. Please go away. We're celebrating an important event, and you're ruining it. I looked at my daughter and saw a stranger in front of me. Where is the little girl who was scared to read to her at bedtime, who was proud when I taught her how to make her first pancakes, who cried on my shoulder when she broke her knee? Okay, Merritt, I said at last I'll leave. I won't ruin your evening. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Wait. Her voice softened. Did you order yet? Did you pay? I realized what she was worried about. Not that I'd leave upset, but that I might have trouble paying the bill. Don't worry about my finances, Merritt, I said coldly, releasing my hand. I'll manage somehow. I headed back into the lounge, not toward the exit, but toward their table. Something clicked inside me. Decades of suppressed bitters and frustration. Maybe it was time to set the record straight. Merritt hurried after me, clearly concerned about what I was about to do. I walked over to their table and stood where I could see everyone. I apologize for the interruption, I said politely. I just wanted to wish everyone a pleasant evening. Fletcher forced a smile. Thank you, Birch. Are you leaving already? No, I smiled. I'm not done here yet. Merritt, who was standing next to me, suddenly grabbed my elbow. Dad, please, she hissed. You're embarrassing us. I'm embarrassing you. I turned to her, feeling something break inside me. By coming over to say hello to your own daughter? By pretending to be someone you're not. Her voice became harsh. You can't afford this place. A simple man like you, she faltered, realizing she was speaking too loudly. People at the neighboring table started to turn around. Speak up, Merritt, I said quietly. A simple man like me, what shouldn't be here, she finished, her face red with anger and embarrassment. Go away. You're embarrassing us. There was silence for a moment. I watched Fletcher's guests squirm awkwardly in their seats, not knowing where to avert their eyes. Fletcher looked at me with a strange satisfaction, as if he'd always expected me to be in this humiliating situation. As you wish, I said at last, standing upright. Have a good evening. I turned and headed not for the exit, but across the hall to the inconspicuous door that led to my office. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Merritt watching me with a puzzled look. In my office, I sat down at my desk and took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear or shame, but from adrenaline and anger. I never thought it would come to this, that my own daughter would publicly disown me. The intercom on the desk lit up and Laurie's voice came through the speaker. Mr. Endicott, we have a little situation. I know, Laurie. I interrupted her. I created this situation myself. What am I supposed to do about a table 9? I thought for a moment. Serve them as usual. Let them enjoy their evening. When it's time for the check, give it to me. If you say so, sir. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the monitors of the surveillance cameras set up in the room. On one of the screens, I could see Merritt's table. She had returned to her seat, but she looked tense. Fletcher was saying something to her, probably trying to smooth over the awkwardness in front of the guests. The others pretended nothing had happened, but their laughter and conversation seemed strained. An hour later, as they finished dessert and coffee, I saw Brandon approach their table with a billfold. Fletcher held out his hand nonchalantly, but Brandon, as I'd instructed, softly addressed Merritt. Madam, Mr. Endicott asked me to tell you that the bill is paid. Merritt looked puzzled. Mr. Endicott? She repeated. You mean my father? Yes, ma'am. Brandon nodded. Mr. Birch Endicott. But how could he have paid? Her face expressed utter bewilderment. As the owner of the restaurant, madam, Brandon replied calmly. Mr. Endicott has owned the old War for 26 years. I watched Merritt's face change from bewilderment to shock, from shock to disbelief, and finally to realization. She turned to Fletcher, who looked equally stunned. There must be some mistake, Fletcher said, looking at Brandon incredulously. Birch is a cook. He can't be the owner. There's no mistake, sir. Laurie walked over to the table, having heard the conversation. Mr. Endicott is the founder and sole owner of the Old Wharf. He is also the recipient of 2 Michelinsters and several national culinary awards. I've seen their guests exchange glances, a mixture of surprise and awkwardness. One of them, Harrison, I think, leaned over and whispered something to his wife. Where is he? Merritt's voice was barely audible through the camera microphone. In his office, ma'am, Laurie answered. If you wish, I can show you out. Merritt stood up, her face pale. Yes, please. I turned off the monitor and straightened up in my chair. A moment later, there was a knock on the door and Laurie looked in. Mr. Endicott, your daughter wants to talk to you. Let her come in. I nodded. Merritt entered alone, leaving Fletcher and their guests in the hall. She stopped in the middle of the room, looking around. My office was spacious and elegant leather armchairs, an antique desk, walls hung with pictures. Of the restaurant over the years and, of course, my awards and diplomas. All this time, she began, her voice shaking. Do you own this place? Yes, I answered simply, since it opened. But why? Why didn't you ever tell us? She looked lost, like a child who'd learned that Santa Claus didn't exist. Did you ever ask? I answered with a question. Have you ever been interested in my life, Merritt? My work, my accomplishments. She was silent, and I could see the different emotions struggling in her eyes. Shock, disbelief, embarrassment, and maybe somewhere deep down, shame. All this time, I continued, you and Fletcher have treated me like a poor relation, tolerated out of politeness. You were ashamed of me in front of your friends. You thought I lived on a pittance, and even that seemed too good for me. I didn't. She hesitated. I wasn't ashamed of you. I just what, Merritt? I got up from the table. Just thought I wasn't good enough for your world. What does it mean to be a mere man who shouldn't be here? She lowered her eyes. That's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what I meant. I walked over to the wall of pictures. Look at this. Here's me and your Mothra at the restaurant opening. Here's me getting my first Michelin star. Here's a picture from the New York Times when they named Old Wharf one of the 10 best restaurants in the South. All of Fishapend while you were growing up. And not once, you never once escaped what I really did. You always said you were a chef, her voice beckoned me defensive. You never mentioned owning a restaurant. And you never asked, I repeated. You just assumed I was a loser, and that suited your idea of me. She stood silent, not knowing what to say. Voices could be heard outside the door. Probably Fletcher and their guests were waiting in the hallway. So what now? She asked at last. Did you settle this up to humiliate us, to get revenge? I shook my head, feeling suddenly tired. No, Merritt. I just wanted you to know the truth. So you could see who I really am, not who you made up in your head. So you'd realize how much it hurts when your own daughter shames you for something you never were. Something flashed in her eyes. Maybe realization, maybe remorse. But then the door opened and Fletcher walked in, his face red with embarrassment and anger. What kind of game are you playing, Burr? He almost shouted. You've mad fools of us in front of my colleagues. I didn't do anything, I replied calmly. You chose this restaurant. I just said hello to you and your wife publicly disowned me. Everything else is a natural consequence. Fletcher opened his mouth to say something, but Merritt stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. Wait, she said, not taking her eyes off me. All this time, all these years you've been successful, rich, and you didn't tell us. Why would I tell you? I asked. So you'd love me for my money, for my status, for what I could give you, not for who I am. But you gave Ia money for college, she said. And I realized she was already putting the pieces of the teases of the Mizela puzzle together. It was you, wasn't it? That anonymous foundation. I didn't answer, but my look said it all for me. Oh my God. She sank into the chair in front of my desk. All this time, Fletcher shifted his gaze from me to Merritt, his anger changing to calculate interest. So you really own all of this? He circled the room, implying the entire restaurant. How successful are you? Typical Fletcher, always thinking about money and status. Enough, I answered succinctly. But if you're hoping this is going to change our relationship in any way, you're wrong. What do you mean? Merritt looked up. I mean that I'm not going to suddenly become a beloved father-in-law and father, just because you found out I'm not a poor old man. All I ever wanted from you was respect and love for who I am, not what I have. And you both failed that test. Laurie knocked on the door and looked inside. Excuse me, Mr. Endicott, but Mr. Hayes's guests are asking if they are leaving. Fletcher turned toward the door, clearly annoyed that their conversation had been interrupted. Tell them we'll be right there, he said sharply. This isn't your restaurant, Mr. Hayes. Laurie's voice was polite, but firm. I'm asking for Mr. Endicott. Fletcher looked as if he'd been punched. His face flushed even more. Tell them the evening's over, Laurie, I said. Show them out and call a cab if you need one. Yes, Mr. Endicott. She nodded and closed the door. Merritt looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Shock, disbelief, maybe even some respect. What now? She asked quietly. Now you know the truth, I answered, sitting back down at the table. The rest is up to you. For the next 2 days, I ignored the phone. Merritt called every few hours, leaving messages that gradually changed in tone from excuses to annoyance. I didn't answer. What could I say to her? 26 years of silence couldn't be fixed with one conversation. Instead, I immersed myself in my work. The season was in full swing. Tourists were filling North Little Rock, and the old wharf was more popular than ever. I spent my days in the kitchen, helping Rowan with the new summer menu, and my evenings in my office, dealing with the backlog of paperwork. On the third day after the incident, Rowan knocked on my office door. Mr. A. He looked a little concerned. There's a girl asking for you. Says she's your granddaughter. I looked up from my papers. Ayla, is she her? Yeah, she's waiting at the service entrance. Said she didn't want to be seen in the hall. That was unexpected. After what happened, I thought. Aya would avoid me too, following her parents' example. Show her out. I put my pen away and straightened up in my chair. A moment later, the door opened again and Aya walked in. She didn't look as confident as usual, jeans instead of her usual elegant outfit, her hair in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup. She fidgeted nervously with the strap of her bag. Hi, Grandpa. Her voice was quiet, almost guilty. Aya, I stood up, walking around the table. I didn't expect to see you. Mom doesn't know I'm here. She glanced quickly at the door as if she was afraid Merritt might suddenly appear. I told her I was going to meet some friends. I see. I pointed to the chair across the table. Have a seat. Would you like something? Tea? Coffee? No, thanks. She sat down, still nervous. Yep. I Camito apologized for what happened. For Mom and Dad, for everything. I returned to my chair, watching her closely. Unlike Merritt, Aya looked genuinely upset. You have nothing to apologize for, I said softly. You didn't do anything wrong, but I'm a part of this. She looked up at me. All these years I've treated you like you're a poor old man to be put up with too. I didn't realize who you really were because I never told you. I smiled slightly. And that was my choice. Say, don't blame yourself. She shook her head, not accepting my excuse. After what happened, Mom told me everything. That you owned the old wharf. That you were rich. She said the last word almost in a whisper like it was a secret. I couldn't believe it. All this time I've been the same person. I finished for her, just with slightly different circumstances than you thought. But why? She leaned forward. Why didn't you ever tell us? Why did you let Mom and Dad treat you like that? So dismissive? I suggested. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. It's awful. I feel so guilty. I sighed, looking at the picture of Virginia on the table. What would she say now? Probably that it was time for the truth. The whole truth. Listen, Aya, I'm going to tell you a story, not about how I got rich. That's not that interesting. It's about why he chose to keep it from you. I got up and walked over to the little bar in the corner of the study. Sure you don't want anything? I have some excellent apple cider. Non-alcoholic, I added, seeing her hesitation. Okay, she smiled weakly. Cider sounds good. I poured 2 glasses and returned to the table, handing one to her. When I was young, about your age, I worked as an assistant cook in a small restaurant in Memphis. It didn't pay much, but I loved to cook. That's where I met your grandmother, Virginia. I smiled at the memory. She was a waitress working part-time during the summers between semesters at college. The prettiest girl I'd ever seen and smart. She was studying pedagogy, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Aya listened attentively, forgetting her cider. We fell in love, married a year later. She finished college and I continued to work in the kitchens, gaining experience. When your mom was born, it was hard for us. I was working 2 jobs. Virginia was an elementary school teacher. Money was barely enough. I took a sip of cider, gathering my thoughts. Merritt grew up seeing us struggle, seeing how we counted every dime, how we denied ourselves everything so she could have the essentials. I had shaped her. She became obsessed with getting out, with being rich, with status. She was ashamed of us, her ordinary parents. How could this have happened? Aya asked quietly. How could she be ashamed of you when you had done so much for her? It's easy when you're 12 and all your classmates go home to school in designer clothes. And you're in something your mother restitched from old clothes. I shook my head. I don't blame her. Kids are cruel and teenagers especially so. I walked over to the window looking out at the river glistening in the afternoon sunlight. Everything changed when I won a regional cooking competition. The grand prize was modest, but with a Cameo grant to open my own restaurant and an internship with a famous chef in New Orleans. For the first time in my life, I had money and opportunity. The old wharf? I guessed. Yes, I nodded. I opened it 26 years ago. The area was an industrial zone back then, and real estate was cheap. I took a risk, and the risk paid off. I went back to the table and sat down looking at my granddaughter. The restaurant became a success almost immediately. I was in the right place at the right time. The wave of interest in Southern food was just beginning. 3 years later, we had our first Michelin star. 5 years later, we had an article in the New York Times. The money was flowing. And you didn't tell your mom? Aya looked puzzled. Why? I sighed, thinking back to the moment when Virginia and I had made that decision. By then, Merritt was already in college on a scholarship that I was secretly paying for. She rarely came home, always finding reasons to stay on campus for weekends and holidays. When she did come, she only talked about her status friends, their rich families, the life she wanted for herself. I paused, choosing my words. One day she brought Fletcher to meet us. He was just like he is now, self-righteous, superficial, obsessed with status. They appraised our house together, our furniture, our clothes. I could see the contempt in their eyes. "Oh, Grandpa." Aya lowered her gaze, clearly embarrassed. At that moment, I realized that if I told them the truth, that I was a successful restaurant owner, that we had money, their attitude would instantly change. They will smile, flatter, try to capitalize, but it would be fake. So I decided not to tell. "And Grandma, did you agree?" "Not right away." I smiled, remembering our arguments with Virginia. She thought we should be honest, give Merritt a chance to change. But I insisted. "Let's see who she chooses," I said. "Us just plain parents who love her for who she is or the status and money she craves." I fell silent, and Aya finished for me. "And she chose status? Yes." I nodded. "After she married Fletcher, she almost stopped visiting us. When you were born, she brought you back every few months, usually when they needed money." I gave no questions. As Virginia traveled to see you more often, tried to keep in touch, but Merritt always kept her distance. I went to Theclaset and pulled out a photo album. When your grandmother was diagnosed, Merritt didn't visit much. "Too busy," she said, "too much work." Virginia didn't blame her, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I opened the scrapbook to Apogee, with a picture of Virginia in a hospital room smiling despite harrownness. In her last days, she had made me promise not to leave you. "They're air blood, Birch," she said. "The only thing left after us." Ella picked up the album, her eyes filling with tears at the sight of the photograph. "I barely remember my grandmother," she whispered. "I was 5 when she died." "She loved you very much," I said softly. "She always carried your picture with her." Ayla turned the page, and there was a picture of little Ayla on Virginia's lap. "After she died," I continued, "Merritt helped me sell the house." "It's too big for you alone, Daddy," she said. By then, I had this apartment above the restaurant, but I didn't tell her. I gave the money from the sale of the house to her for Aya's education. In fact, I'd already set up a trust fund for you, which paid for half of your college tuition. Ayla looked up, shocked. "What? But Mom and Dad say they paid for my college with the help of Dad's parents." "They paid for part of it," I shrugged. "The rest was me through an anonymous trust fund. Your parents never found out." "Oh my God!" She covered her face with her hands. Everything I knew, everything I believed in was a lie, not lies. "I put me." Hand gently down on her shoulder, just not the whole truth. "I didn't want you to get between me and your parents. I didn't want you to feel guilty or obligated." She shook her head, clearly shaken. "And all these years, you've just put up with their attitude, their neglect." "I made my choice," I answered simply, "and you know, it had its own freedom. I could be myself without worrying that people liked me for my money or status. I had real friends, real relationships with my employees, my customers, my suppliers, people who appreciated me for who I was. We didn't." She lowered her eyes. "We only valued what we thought you could give us, which, as it turned out, was a tiny fraction of what you actually had. You were a child," squeezed her hand. "You were just following your parents' lead." And now she looked at me. "I'm not a child now. I'm 23, and I feel like I've been living my whole life wrong with the wrong values, the wrong goals." She was silent, and I could see the inner struggle in her eyes. "Did Mom call you?" she asked suddenly. "Yes, many times." I nodded. I didn't answer. "And rightly." "So she pressed her lips together. You know what she said when we got home after that dinner? 'Can you believe your grandfather was rich all this time and hid it from us? To think how much he could have done for us.' I chuckled bitterly, but I wasn't surprised. It was so like Merritt. "And what did Fletcher say?" "He was furious." Ayla shook her head. "Not because of the way they treated you, but because you tricked them. Like you were obligated to tell them about your money so they could, I don't know, use you. And what do you think about all that? I asked, watching her closely. She thought for a moment, then raised a clear gaze to me. I think you were right to hide the truth. And I think Mom and Dad's reaction just proves it. They're not remorseful for the way they treated you. They're just angry that they missed out on an opportunity to take advantage. I felt a surge of pride in my granddaughter. Despite her upbringing, she retained the ability to see the truth. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know, she admitted innocently. I can't look at my parents the way I used to. Not after what I found out, but I can't just walk away. You don't have to, I shrugged. They're your parents, whatever they are. I never wanted you to turn your back on them because of me. It's not about you, she shook her head. It's about who they are. It's about their values, the way they treat people. I didn't want to be like that. I looked at my granddaughter with growing respect. There was something of Virginia about her, the same directness, the same clarity of thought. You know, I say it thoughtfully, I've always had my hands full in restaurant marketing. Rowan is brilliant in the kitchen, but we're behind in social media. If you ever want to try something new, her eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? Justin? Option, I shrugged. There's no pressure. You can think about it. She hesitated, then smiled. I'll think about it. Thank you. We sat in silence for a while, each absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Ayla put the empty glass on the table and stood up. I have to go. My parents will be asking where I am. Sure, I got up too. Thank you for coming, Aya. It means a lot to me. She hugged me, and I felt that this hug was different from all the previous ones, more sincere, more warm. No, thank you, she said, pulling away, for telling me the truth and for giving me a chance to be a better person. I walked her to the service exit, watching her walk away down the narrow alley toward the main road. Something was different today, not just for her, but for me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was keeping the promise I'd made to Virginia not to leave our family. At least the part of it that was open to a real relationship. Back in the study, I noticed that Aya had left a brooch on the desk. The same one I'd given her for her birthday. There was a note next to it. I'll clean it and wear it proudly. Thank you for reminding me of what really matters. I picked up the brooch, and a ray of sunlight coming through the window made the silver and pearls shine. Like Virginia once had, Eno saw hope in the next generation of our family. The phone rang again, another call from Merritt. This time I didn't immediately reject it, but I didn't answer it either. Let her suffer a little longer. I needed time to decide how to proceed. With Aya, it was clear she was worthy of the truth and my trust. With Merritt and Fletcher, I wasn't so sure. 26 years of deceit on my part and neglect on theirs had created a chasm that might be impossible to bridge. But talking to Aya tonight gave him hope that at least some of my family could be saved. And maybe that's enough. The week after, my conversation with Aya flew by with the usual worries. Their restaurant ran like clockwork. The summer season was in full swing, and I had almost no time to think about my family drama. Almost. Merritt kept calling, but less frequently. Her messages became more and more irritated. Dad, this is ridiculous. We need Tadek. You can't ignore. U.S. forever. Fletcher thinks you're being childish. That last one especially made me laugh. Fletcher calling someone else infantile. YA came by twice. The first time was to return the brooch she'd cleaned and show me how well it looked on her blouse. Second time was to bring her resume and portfolio. She was really interested in my job offer. I haven't told my parents it, she admitted as we discussed her possible duties. They think I'm just going out with friends. You're an adult, Aya, I reminded her. You don't have to report to them every step of the way. Ich know, she sighed. But they're Complicated, especially now. Mom talks about you all the time, about how you tricked us all, how you hid your wealth. Dad makes plans, they whisper in the evenings. I wasn't surprised. Knowing Merritt and Fletcher, it was obvious that they wouldn't leave a suddenly discovered rich relative alone. Be careful, was all I said, and remember that you mustn't come between us. Sunday morning, when the restaurant was closed, I enjoyed a rare moment of silence on the balcony of my apartment. The river glistened in the morning sun. Seagulls circled over the water, searching for breakfast. I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when I heard the doorbell ring. Ayla had said she'd come at noon so we could discuss details of her future work, but it was only 10:30. Now, who would come at this hour? When I opened the door, I froze in place. On the threshold stood Merritt and Fletcher, both dressed too formally for a Sunday morning. Merritt held a basket of fruit and a bottle of wine, obviously a gift. Daddy. She tried to smile, but the smile came out strained. We finally found you. You were looking for me. I didn't invite them in, staying in the doorway. That's strange, Beckos. I haven't disappeared, and you know where I live and work. Fletcher cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Birch, we're here to talk. Why don't you invite us in? He hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, but another part of me was curious. What would they say? How would they try to justify their behavior? And most importantly, what did they really want? Come in, I stepped back, allowing them into the apartment. They entered, looking around with poorly counseled surprise. My apartment wasn't luxurious by the standards of the rich, but it was spacious and elegant with antique furniture that Virginia and I had collected over the years and a view off the river that many people would give a fortune for. What an unusual place, Merritt said, setting the basket on the coffee table. We didn't know you had such a big apartment. There's a lot you didn't know about me, I replied, pointing to the couch. Have a seat? Coffee? Yes, please. Merritt sat down, straightening the folds in her overly asterisk thanks for watching.